Okay, let me ask you something. Have you ever crammed for a huge exam? You walk in feeling like an absolute genius, and then, maybe a week later, poof, it's all gone. Just vanished into thin air. Well, today we are digging into why our brains seem to be these professional-grade forgetting machines. And, get this, how that might actually be a feature, not a bug. So what is really going on in there? Let's find out.
This quote from an A-level student named Michelle. Does that sound familiar? It's the classic student nightmare, right? You put in all the hours, you ace the test, and then it feels like your brain just hits the delete button. It is so frustrating, and it can seriously make you question if you ever really learned the material in the first place.
And look, if you've ever felt this way, you are definitely not alone. It even has a name, the post-exam brain dump. You see students on Reddit talking about it all the time, how it can make you feel like a total fraud, even if you have a great GPA. It's a textbook case of imposter syndrome. But here's a wild thought. What if this isn't a flaw? What if forgetting is actually a good thing?
To really get what's happening, we've got to start with the classic explanation for why we forget. It's this idea that's been around for over a century, but as you're about to see, it might not be telling us the whole story, not even close.
Okay, so this is the famous forgetting curve. It was first theorized by a guy named Hermann Ebbinghaus way back in the 1880s. And the idea is actually pretty simple. When you learn something new, your ability to hold on to that information basically just drops off a cliff, unless you actively, consciously work to remember it. And when you look at the graph, it is dramatic. It shows this super steep, rapid decline that just seems to confirm our worst fears, that most of what we learn is just destined to fade away into nothing. Honestly, it's a pretty bleak picture for anyone trying to build lasting knowledge. But right here is where the story takes a fascinating turn. What if forgetting isn't about erasure at all? What if those memories are still there, just, well, inaccessible? Asking that one question completely reframes the entire problem.
You see, psychologists make this really critical distinction between recall and recognition. Recall is when you have to pull an answer out of thin air. Think of a fill-in-the-blank question. But recognition is just identifying the right answer when you see it, like in a multiple-choice test. And it turns out we are way better at recognition. Studies show we only lose about 16% of what we can recognize compared to a massive 28% of what we can recall. The knowledge is often still in there.
And this leads to this amazing thing called savings in relearning. Think about a language you studied back in high school. You might not be able to recall a single verb now, but I promise you, if you started studying it again, you would pick it up so much faster than you did the first time around. That's because the memory isn't actually deleted. There's a residue left behind, which makes relearning incredibly efficient. So, if these forgotten memories aren't truly gone, then what on earth is happening? Well, this brings us to a radical new theory from the world of neuroscience that completely flips the script. Get ready for this? Forgetting isn't a failure of your brain. It's actually one of its most powerful features. That's right. Researchers from places like Trinity College Dublin and the University of Toronto are now proposing that forgetting is an active process. It's a form of learning that helps our brains adapt. It's not some passive decay over time. It's an intentional, functional remodeling of our own minds. Pretty cool, right? Now, to understand how this works, we need to get just a little bit biological. Memories are physically stored in our brains in these specific clusters of neurons called engram cells. You can literally think of an engram as the physical trace of a memory. So when you forget something, these engram cells aren't destroyed. Instead, your brain actively remodels the circuits that connect to them, and that makes them inaccessible. The memory is still there, perfectly preserved, but you've basically lost the key to the safe. It's been deliberately filed away. But why would our brains even do this? Well, it's all about flexibility. In a world that's constantly changing, old, irrelevant information can actually get in the way of making good decisions. This process of natural forgetting allows our brains to prune access to outdated memories and prioritize what's important right now. It's what helps us learn and adapt. Okay, so if we can't stop this natural, adaptive process of forgetting, how do we work with it? The goal isn't to defeat forgetting, it's to partner with our brain. And there are 3 powerful, science-backed strategies to build knowledge that actually sticks around. First up is spaced repetition. So instead of cramming all at once, you review information at increasing intervals, maybe after an hour, then a day, then a few days, then a week, and so on. This technique is a super powerful signal to your brain that says, hey, this specific piece of information is important, and I need you to keep it accessible. And every single time you do a spaced review, you are essentially resetting and flattening that scary forgetting curve we saw earlier.
You're effectively telling your brain, hey, don't put this memory in the safe just yet, I still need it. And that makes the memory trace stronger and way more resistant to being filed away.
All right. The second strategy is active recall, sometimes called retrieval practice. This is the absolute opposite of passive learning. So instead of just rereading your notes or highlighting a textbook, you force your brain to actually pull the information out. Think flashcards, practice quizzes, or even just closing your book and trying to explain a concept out loud to an empty room.
Now, this is so important. You have to understand that active recall is not a test. As cognitive scientists always emphasize, it's a low-stakes learning strategy. The goal is not to get a perfect score. The goal is to strengthen the memory every single time you retrieve it. The final exam should never be the first time you try to recall something.
And finally, we have interleaved practice. This just means mixing it up. So instead of studying one single topic for 3 hours straight, which is called blocking, you switch between different subjects or types of problems. Now, it might feel harder in the moment, but it forces your brain to become way more flexible and much better at telling the difference between concepts.
So when you start combining these three strategies, spaced repetition, active recall, and interleaving, something really cool happens. You move beyond just cramming facts for an exam. You start building deep, flexible, and durable knowledge. You shift from just learning something to truly knowing it.
And that brings us to the ultimate purpose of all of this, what's called transfer of learning. This is the ability to take what you learned in one situation and apply it to a completely new one. Knowing a formula is fine, but knowing when and how to use that formula to solve a real-world problem, well, that's everything. So what's the big takeaway here? We really need to stop thinking of forgetting as our enemy. It's this natural, brilliant mechanism for keeping our minds efficient and adaptable. And by using smart learning strategies, we can work with our brain's own operating system to signal what's important, building knowledge that's not just remembered, but is actually ready to be used.
And that leaves us with one final kind of provocative thought. If our brains are constantly making memories inaccessible to help us learn and adapt, it raises a pretty fascinating question. In a world of endless information overload, what should we actively choose to forget to make room for what truly matters?